Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mobile UX Marathon. Thank you so much for joining. We'll give everyone just 1 or 2 minutes to get started. While we do that, go ahead and enter in the chat where you are joining us from. We just want to get a sense of where our audience is sitting today. Hello. Got Florida, Michigan, New York. That is where our presenters are from today. So welcome. Ooh, Alaska, great. LA, Seattle, Atlanta, to Atlanta. Bellevue, Kentucky, North Carolina, Santa Monica. Got some great US representation today. Oh, and Sao Paulo, Minneapolis, Spain, Connecticut, New Jersey. Ooh, Montreal. I was there last year. It's beautiful there. South Africa. Wow. Welcome. So you can continue entering where you're from. For those of you who have already answered, I would love to know as we get started what your biggest pet peeves are when using your mobile phone for UX. So for me, it is clickable phone numbers. That is my number one pet peeve. If you have something that really just drives you crazy on mobile, feel free to enter it now. We can take a quick poll. Not having the right keyboard, absolutely. Things being in the top corners, slow loading speed, small font, links that are too small, ads, especially ads that you can't get to go away. So the text to highlight, yes, that's frustrating. All right. Feel free to keep adding those. I just love to see kind of what people are finding frustrating. It changes all the time as things become more expected. All of a sudden, not having those things, the correct keypads is a great example of that. Becomes so frustrating when you get used to it being a certain way. So thanks for sharing those. And let's go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining. This is our second edition of the Mobile UX Marathon. We're very, very thrilled to have you all with us today. My name is Emily Ferdinandi. I'm a mobile specialist based in San Francisco, and I'm joined today by my two colleagues, Ayumi Rogers and Patrick Feeney. All of us are mobile UX specialists here at Google. We work with clients across a variety of verticals and sectors, helping them improve their mobile web experience for users. And so we're very excited to have a chance to chat with you all today and provide you some of the information that we share with others on UX best practices as it relates to mobile websites. A quick overview of what we're going to go through today for the next hour. We will do a brief recap of the UX best practice videos that were posted on the Mobile Marathon website. Then Patrick is going to walk us through the LIFT model, a way of thinking about the UX best practices and ensuring that your site is following all of those guidelines. Then he'll turn it over to Ayumi, who is going to talk about a very important topic of designing for accessibility, making sure your site is easy to use for as many users, if not all users. And then last but not least, we will leave about 20 to 30 minutes at the end for a Q&A. That will be a combination of both questions that were submitted on the Mobile Marathon website and questions that are entered into the live chat. So as we're going through this content, please enter any questions you have. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can. If you know the answer to someone's question that you feel free to chime in as well. We can all learn from each other. We're excited to have this community of UX experts and those that are interested in it so that we can share our knowledge. Quick recap for those of you that didn't join last week. We're going to do 6 of these weekly webinars. They will be at this time every Tuesday, so 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And they work, if you go to the Mobile Marathon website, you can watch the recordings of the topics that we'll be talking about. You can then submit questions on the website and then join the live stream every Tuesday to see new content and to see your questions answered. Last week we talked about overcoming barriers to mobile, today's UX best practices, and upcoming we have research methods, Google Analytics, A/B testing, progressive web technologies. So please keep coming back. We have a lot of great content for you. Quickly wanted to address the feedback from our first webinar last week. I know there were some playback issues. We've tried to lower the resolution of the presentation, so hopefully it will be a little bit better today audio-wise. Please let us know in the chat if there are issues, but hopefully it's resolved. The feedback was that the Q&A and the content were really well received, so thank you for that. Hopefully it will continue to be the same. More examples, more case studies. We've tried to include a lot more examples this time, as well as a few case studies. There was a question to send the slides after the live stream and answer the remaining questions offline. Unfortunately, we can't do that, but we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. We will explain the abbreviations on the slides. We try to cut out the acronyms, but sometimes they sneak in. And last but not least, everyone agreed that lack of time and lack of UX expertise were the most common barriers to mobile across last week's audience. So just wanted to follow up and let you know those results. So with that, I will turn it over to Ayumi, who is going to go over the UX best practices videos that were on the website. Give a quick recap.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. So here's the quick and dirty recap of what was covered in 3 videos we shared in preparation for this session. For more details and case studies, which I actually won't cover here, make sure you check them out on the Mobile UX Marathon website on the May 14th tab. Just want to highlight that that was one of the points of feedback, was more case studies. So make sure you're taking the time to watch those videos. There's a lot of great content in there. In the first video on homepage and landing pages, we learn that your visitors will pass judgment immediately, and that's why it's important to have 3 key elements above the fold. The first is a clear value proposition, helping people really understand why they should stick around to consider your business. The second is a call to action, clearly indicating what it is people should do. Use value-driven language in your CTA buttons that align with the mindset of the user, and be really thoughtful about the placement. The third element to have above the fold is a visual. Use icons or images that support your value prop. We were also cautioned against auto-rotating banners or carousels, also known as forced content exploration, which we want to avoid, and suggest that you put users in the driver's seat, also known as user-initiated exploration. This is the expectation of users today. As always, test everything before you scale changes across your site or your app. In the second video, we learned some do's and don'ts of navigation, filters, and search. Having a thoughtful navigation pattern is key to making people feel oriented within your site or your app. So it's worth revisiting this with your team once in a while, and think about how you might present content in different ways or allow users to navigate your site or your app in different ways. Use data wherever possible to really understand what people want to do and what content they want to see. Test a sticky top navigation, or maybe even a navigation drawer to house secondary functions, and a bottom nav on mobile for commonly used toggles. For search, test showing search history from recent visits, popular suggestions, or similar suggestions. You basically never want to return nothing, even if you don't have the very thing that was searched, or perhaps the user made a typo. Don't shame them. Ask them something like, "Did you mean diamond earrings?" And when it comes to filters, expose all filtering options and surface the ones that are used most frequently. Make it easy to see which are applied, make it easy to modify what's been applied, and to clear all the filters at once. You also want to update real time how the applied filters impacted the number of results. That way, users can know if they want to remove or add additional filters. In the third and last video, we learned that the main goal of checkout and forms should be to remove friction wherever possible, since people are ready and they're willing to commit to you. So don't give them unnecessary reasons to walk away at this point. Manage expectations by being super clear about the work that's involved, and minimize that work wherever possible by using the right keypads, leveraging browser autofill wherever you can, and being clear about invalid inputs. We also heard that on average, about a third of your people will abandon carts that require a forced login. So while it's probably more valuable to your business to have users logging in, seriously consider the trade-off you're making here by turning these users away. Use your analytics data to identify where people are dropping out of your conversion flow to help prioritize your design and dev resources. Again, check out the Mobile UX Marathon website for more details on all of these topics. And I'll pass it over to Patrick.
Thank you, Ayumi. Today we're going to discuss the lift model. The lift model was created by Chris Goward. Chris is the author of You Should Test That, which is one of the pioneering books on online conversion optimizations. So what does this framework look like? The lift model consists of 6 elements to analyze on every landing page from a user's perspective. We will describe these 6 elements in analogy with an airplane getting ready for flight. We're going to need to reduce drag, create lift, and give our plane some extra boost to help it fly. Let's start with the value proposition. As soon as a visitor enters your site, they need to know who you are, what you offer, and why you should feel confident in starting their research phase at your site. This is going to be our plane. It is what we are trying to deliver to the customer. As Ayumi mentioned in our recap, there are 3 elements that should be visible on every page, with value proposition being one of them. When we look at value propositions, they can be anything from free shipping to customer reviews. It's important that they remain above the fold to help drive action from the user. The value proposition is where you want to differentiate yourself from competitors and remind users why they should purchase or sign up with you. What makes your business unique, and how can users take advantage of that? Say you are in an online nursing school. If your graduates achieve 98% employment upon completing your degree, highlight that for your users. Show the value of enrolling at your school. The other key to value propositions is to test various iterations across your landing pages, reminding users throughout your conversion funnel of your value proposition. This helps reinforce the statement and drive action. Let's pause for a moment here and take advantage of our live chat. Is anyone willing to describe a value proposition they've tested that has resonated well with their clients? If so, please fill one in the chat. Great. Hopefully, we'll see a few of those as we continue. The second element of the LIFT framework is clarity. We want to increase clarity for users to help them find what they are looking for. How easily do we make it for the user to take action when they are on your website? We surveyed users and asked what is the most important part about a website. While you may instinctively feel like aesthetics and the look of the website would be number one, it is actually speed and the ability to find what you are searching for that is the most important to users. By focusing your efforts on mobile navigation and site search, we can help users get what they are looking for faster. So, what's one way we can get your website to be faster and more informative quickly? Try removing unnecessary words on the page, as Steve Krug puts it. Test eliminating unnecessary words and phrases on your page. We have found that most users don't read web pages, but rather they scan pages for key phrases and actions. Test icons, bullet list, and images to help make things easier and cleaner for users to digest while scanning pages. Oftentimes, top categories are hidden in menu bars instead of being highlighted on home pages. Remember that to get to these categories, your users are one click away from their current view. Help the user with this navigation by testing their addition to your homepage. Finally, if you have search on your web page, it can be a powerful call to action on the landing page itself. Take advantage of this and test a design where you display the search bar prominently. A/B tests show the more prominently you display the search bar, the more searches you are going to get. But the real reason you should consider A/B testing this is the conversion rate for users who use search is usually higher than for users who don't interact with it. In fact, on average, users who interact with the search bar are 4 times more likely to convert. Who here wouldn't like 4 times more conversions? So leverage your site search to help users quickly find what they are looking for. Now, let's add a little fuel to our plane for takeoff. Let's discuss urgency. How can we help give users that extra push to take action? Robert Cialdini is best known for his book and studies on persuasion and marketing. His quote here is a great reason why we want to create urgency for users. Simply put, people want more of the things they can have less of. And we all know that when we think about it ourselves, this is true. Or if anyone has small children, like I do, you see this in action all the time. Many people have heard of the phrase FOMO, the fear of missing out. Create FOMO for users by testing elements on your pages to create an urgency or scarcity. Examples include countdowns, low stock, or expiring offers. List is a global fashion curator that allows users to browse and purchase thousands of items from different designers on a single website. List tested adding urgency elements to their pages. They added the simple line, "Hurry, this item is selling fast," to product pages, and conversions increased by 17%. The next piece of the LIFT framework is relevance. We want to increase the relevance of your page for users. Relevance means giving consumers the exact information that they need. Urgency alone won't work if your site isn't relevant. When people search, they go into a pattern matching mind frame, making them only see the words they have in mind. Keep that information sense strong and reinforce it. Go through the search terms people use to get to your page and make sure you highlight them on the page and use them in navigation. One common pitfall is using internal phrases that aren't used by your customers on pages. If you are an apparel company, don't highlight footwear when users search for shoes or sneakers. The next two elements of our framework are the two things we want to reduce for users. This will allow our plane to take flight. The first being reduce distractions. Remember, users want to find what they are looking for quickly and easily. Are you taking your users' attention away from your primary goal by showing too much? We recommend testing one goal per page. Mobile customers are often in a hurry, as evident by the speed factor we mentioned in the earlier survey. Remove any unnecessary bells and whistles to streamline the purchase funnel. If you want a user to add to cart, remove the newsletter signup and chat pop-up from the user's focus. This can be difficult, but streamlining will help reduce the chances your users get distracted. If you absolutely need more than one call to action, then make sure you are using visual design elements to make it clear which action is the primary action and which are secondary actions. So we've reduced distractions. We also want to reduce user anxiety in the lift model. What can we do to remove or reduce user anxiety to ensure action on your page, be it purchase or sign up? The typical consumer often experiences purchase anxiety during three stages of online shopping. We will look at the three stages and elements you can include to help reduce or ease each stage of anxiety. As I go through the stages here, please comment in the live chat if you've ever felt like this on a web page or if you think your customers feel that way on yours. First, am I choosing the right product? Test adding elements like product comparison and reviews on your pages to help ease users' minds at this stage. Reviews can help the consumer find the right product that meets their specific needs. Reviews also act as a persuasion technique, reassuring with proof that real people vouch for the product's quality. The second stage is this the best place to buy from? This is where that value proposition comes in, along with delivery and return information. The third stage, will the purchase be a hassle? 27% of purchases are abandoned because of a long or complicated checkout process. Try simplifying your checkout process to make things easier on your customers and ensure there is less abandonment of your cart. A few examples of what to test include guest checkout, correct keyboards for numeric inputs, removing unnecessary fields, using third-party payment providers like Google Pay. Some of our partners in the travel space have seen customers who had Google Pay selected as their payment type were upwards of 60% more likely to complete their booking flow than those who selected other payment forms. So this completes the lift model, and our pages can soar when we use the testing framework to analyze our web pages. Again, creating a strong value proposition, adding urgency to fuel conversion, increase clarity and relevance for users, while reducing distractions and anxiety. We understand it can be difficult to follow all these steps on every page. So let's look at an example from Mango where they worked through reducing customer anxiety and saw an increase in mobile conversion rate and revenue. Mango is a Spanish fashion retailer. Let's look at the problem they were trying to solve. Too many people were abandoning their shopping cart, and they asked the question, why? First, the Mango team looked at their initial setup in their conversion flow, login and registration. Now, most of you have probably bought something online. How much of a pain is it when you're asked to register or log in? We find that 54% of users will abandon a cart instead of completing a new sign-up. 92% will abandon a purchase if they don't remember the username or password. Maybe it's just you're not in the mood, or maybe you can't remember your password or information. This shouldn't prevent you from the task at hand. Originally, checkout as a guest was an option here, but it's hard to see. You can see there's a chunk of text at the bottom, but when you can't see is there's a form field indicating that there's an option for new customers as it's below the fold. To address this, Mango reduced the blank space so it was more obvious that guest checkout was an option from the get-go. Now it's easy to see that there are two distinct flows. Next, Mango looked at the next step in the checkout flow, dispatch and payment. The call to action was unclear, as you were working on the shipping address here. Confirm payment. I'm only inputting the address at this stage. Second, they are also using a drop down menu for a field that contained two different options, the two delivery methods. You can see they updated both the call to action and used radio buttons to show both the options for delivery. As Mango continued reviewing their conversion funnel, they began work under the payment options. Before they just had Visa open on default. Now there's a better display of various payment options, including third-party solutions like PayPal that help expedite the checkout flow. Additionally, Mango made changes to the order summary at the end of checkout. Previously, they weren't displaying any order summary before the final purchase tab. Now it is displayed just before the final confirmation. And lastly, Mango divided their checkout flow into divided steps. This gives users a clear overview of where they are in the process and the ability to move between the various steps. You can see the updated flow here. So what did all of these anxiety-relieving changes result in? Increased mobile conversions and increased revenue. Now, let's hand it back over to Ayumi to discuss accessibility.
Thanks, Patrick. When we talk about accessibility, we're usually also talking about inclusive design and usability. Their goals, approaches, and guidelines overlap a lot, which is why we encourage teams to think about them holistically when designing websites and apps. Accessibility focuses on ensuring that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with our sites and apps. We want to make sure that anyone who shows up can experience and contribute to your product or service. Over 1 billion people of the world's population, which is 15% of us, have some form of disability. So think about it as an update you need to make to your team's design process and culture, rather than an afterthought once you've already shipped your product. Time for a quick pop quiz. Think about these three people. The man on the left in a wheelchair with impaired physical functioning in his upper and lower body. A boy with a broken arm. And on the right, a woman who's holding a full bag of groceries. Which of them has limited mobility? Add your answers to the chat. So you may have guessed it, the answer is all of them. Even though they all have different relationships with limited mobility, they're all experiencing similar needs. Disability is a much broader term than we think. And looking at the chat, it looks like many of you agree, so we're starting off on the right foot, guys. Many of the areas we focus on for accessibility help not only people with disabilities, but people who may be in different kinds of situations. Just to give one example, alternative text on images is critical to people who are blind because they rely on screen readers since they can't see the images. Alternative text is also helpful for people in low bandwidth areas or using older technology. So this is how accessibility is a key aspect of inclusive design. Inclusive design considers the full range of human diversity with respect to ability, language, culture, gender, age, and any other kind of human difference. If your site or app doesn't work well for users with no disabilities, you can imagine the pain being amplified for people with disabilities. The reverse is also true. When you design for people with disabilities, you're likely creating a better experience for everyone. There are many checklists, guidelines, and tools to help you get started, but keep in mind that it is possible to have a technically accessible site that is actually potentially unusable. So that's where usability comes in. How many of you today run user studies regularly to understand the needs and experiences of your users? Comment in the chat to share with your peers. Great. Those of you who commented know what a critical part of the process this is. Okay, now follow-up question. How frequently are people with accessibility needs included in your study groups? Comment in the chat for your answers to that as well. The reality is that they're usually left out of this step. And as a result, we're missing out on valuable insights regarding their experiences and challenges that could really improve the overall UX. Worst case scenario, a subset of your users come away from engaging with your brand thinking it was a poor or maybe even unusable experience, which we definitely don't want. So I'm going to show you a few examples of things you can look at on your own site, as well as some great tools to get you started in a way that hopefully doesn't feel too daunting. I can see some of these great comments. Someone says, not enough. Uh, Great. Thanks everyone for chiming in. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a wireframe for a fictional travel app called Crane. And this is specifically where the user can apply filters to a flight search. And you can see here the checkboxes and their labels are kind of far away from each other. This is going to be tricky for users with motor difficulties, like perhaps someone with ALS, or even a passenger on a bumpy train. On the right, the content and the controls are much closer to each other. This is going to make life easier for everyone to engage with these controls. Now we're looking at the step where the users fill in their information to purchase a flight. The light font on light background is super trendy right now, but the reality is it's extremely challenging for users with low vision. It's also really hard for sighted people to see, and you can imagine how it would be to look at this on your phone outside on a sunny day. Probably pretty frustrating if you're trying to book a flight. One super easy thing you can do is to ensure that the color contrast between your foreground and background is high enough. This can feel somewhat subjective, but luckily there are tools out there like this one here. This is a material design color tool, which will let you know if the contrast is enough. You can also easily try out different options to compare and pick the one that fits best with your brand and is legible. Just by making a few simple tweaks in color, you can see that the updated design on the right already looks much more aesthetically pleasing. Not only is the text more legible, we now have more of a visual hierarchy in the form with the field names and guiding text. And the call to action really jumps out at you much more clearly. Now the user is filling in their information and has made an error. Some of you may be able to tell that easily by the red outline around the phone number field. However, 8% of people are colorblind, meaning this outline won't do anything for them. Interesting fact, red-green color blindness is the most common type. So an easy fix here is to supplement color-coded information with a secondary signal, such as an icon. Thanks to those of you who are sharing tools that you use as well in the chat. I'd recommend those folks dialed in to check that out and maybe take some notes. You can grab icons from resources like the Material Icons site. We recommend using centralized resources like this one whenever you can, because these are typically common visual metaphors that are recognizable to a wide range of audiences. The updated design on the right is much more clear to everyone, not just users who are colorblind. Now the user is choosing a seat for their upcoming flight. It's important to be able to select the seat they want and easily comprehend that their selection was successful. On mobile, this means having a touch target of about 7 millimeters wide, which is calibrated to the size of an adult's fingertip. Here you can also see that the selected seat is clearly bolded, so the user knows for sure which element on the screen is selected. One thing I didn't want to leave out is that people with disabilities frequently rely on help center content when they're exploring a new experience or maybe feeling a little bit stuck. So make sure you have good accessibility content in your help center. And needless to say, check to make sure that that content is accessible itself. Okay, so I've only just given a handful of examples, but I feel like I've been speaking so much already, and there's so much more to consider when designing for accessibility. The good news is that there are automated tools you can leverage to find out how to get started. What we're looking at here is the Lighthouse tool. You can find this in the Audits tab of Chrome Developer Tools. The great thing about this tool is you don't need to be a developer to get a lot out of it. As you can see on the top right, it provides several different scores, one of which is your accessibility score. Lighthouse runs about 40 automated tests on your site and checks for common accessibility issues. In addition to a score out of 100, if you scroll down, it'll also point out where exactly you're falling short and how exactly to address each point. It will also recommend a series of manual checks that the automated audits wouldn't be able to pick up. deque.com, spelled deque.com, is another great resource that I recommend bookmarking for audits and accessibility guidance. If there are any other accessibility resources your teams use and love, please take a moment to share with others in the live chat. One big barrier to entry when it comes to inclusive design seems to be difficulty imagining how your product or service could possibly satisfy everyone's needs. This is probably impossible, so we can't let that paralyze us. In her book, Mismatch, Kat Holmes makes a great point about inclusion feeling elusive, but exclusion is more concrete, and that gives us something to tackle. Start there. Make plans to talk to people with varying abilities. Watch them navigate your site or app while using their assistive technologies, like a screen reader or a switch device. You might learn, for example, that it takes somebody with mobility impairments relying on a switch device an impossible amount of taps to move between key elements. This is really the best way to find out where your products are falling down today. Here's a great quote that highlights what we've been talking about, that designing for people with disabilities really elevates the experience for everyone. This sounds nice, but there are many examples in history that really make this ring true. For instance, the typewriter was invented in the 1880s by Pellegrino Turri for an Italian contessa who was losing her vision. Bendy straws were made for bedridden hospital patients who couldn't sit upright to drink fluids. And finally, voice recognition was designed for people with mobility needs. So do it. You never know what this opportunity will inspire for you and your team. The great thing about designing inclusively is that people have been thinking about this for years, and they've helped to pave the way to get you started. Efforts like the World Wide Web Consortium Accessibility Initiative and Google's Material Design team have created guidelines that anyone can follow, regardless of the size of your team or where you are in your design process. That about wraps up this section. I know there's a lot to unpack there, but hopefully this inspires you to take one step forward and make your site or app even a little more accessible than it was yesterday.
Thank you so much, Amy and Patrick. That was a lot of information that you fit into that 35 minutes and some wonderful chat going on online as well. So thank you for everyone who's contributing with your favorite resources and all of your insights to the questions being asked. So for the next 15 to 20 minutes, we want to go ahead and answer questions that you submitted on the website or that you can continue to ask on the chat. So to get us started, Amy and Patrick, the first question is, we really want to get feedback from people with disabilities but aren't sure how to reach out. Do you have any suggestions for how folks can get people with disabilities into their user testing panel so that they can get more information on how to improve their sites?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's actually one we get quite frequently. And the answer is it's probably not as hard as you think, but maybe it's your first go around. So it's really about establishing those connections. It might be a little bit more work up front, but I think that's true anytime you're looking for a specific audience to do testing with. One thing to keep in mind is people with disabilities tend to be more willing to participate in these studies. So it's really a matter, again, of just finding out what organizations you can reach out to. There are several organizations that specialize in helping to recruit people that you can leverage. You can also seek out local organizations like university programs or other types of support groups, these kinds of things for specific disabilities. If you just go to Google search and just do a search for disability organizations in New York, for instance, that's probably a great place to start. Also, w3.org, they're the ones that have the established WCAG guidelines. There's a whole section on there for how to conduct participant recruiting and user studies with people with disabilities. So definitely check that out.
Great, thank you. That was a lot of excellent suggestions. The next question is, I really wish I could see a list of great mobile websites using the best practices so that we can better benchmark our own sites. Do you have any suggestions of best-in-class examples that these folks can look at?
Yeah, so there are really two great resources that we have that we've tried to compile a lot of good best practice examples. The first being our own CRO course that's linked on the Mobile Marathon site. So you should see that on the homepage as well as under each of the sections. There'll be links to the CRO course, and as you go through that, there's a lot of great vetted best practices and example use cases. Another good example we have is the Masterful Mobile website. It's masterfulmobile.withgoogle.com, and there are a lot of great examples from across the globe there.
Awesome. And for those of you that are chatting, we did this last week, but I'd love to do it again. If you could just type in any of your favorite sites. I love seeing what everyone else considers to be best in class and who you look to for inspiration. So if you have any favorites, go ahead and type them into the chat and we can see what other great sites we can learn from as well. All right, so this third question is something that I know I get asked all the time. which is about mobile website UX versus apps. So everything you've talked about today, Patrick, was in regards to mobile websites. But how does this apply to apps? Is it the same? Is it different? How should we be thinking about that?
Sure. I can jump in here. So yeah, we get asked this all the time, and the answer is it depends, which I know is not the most popular answer, but I can unpack that a little bit. When it comes to a lot of the basic principles, you obviously want to follow them for both the site and the app. So, for instance, like clearly labeled CTAs or making it really easy to navigate through the different elements and being intuitive, forms being easy to fill out, right? Those best practices will hold true whether we're talking about the site or the app. Where the differences start to come in would be like in the app, for instance, you might not need to have your company logo occupying valuable real estate on every single page because the user knows exactly who you are. They've taken the time to download the app onto their phone. So that would be one difference. But I'm sure if you Google it, there's a whole list of differences to consider. Also keeping in mind, the different expectations that Android and iOS users have, like the back button, for instance, keeping those in mind would result in different design decisions as well. And then I guess the last thing I'd want to bring up is what the use case is for your business. So take like the Starbucks app, for instance. It is very like a loyalty play. It's all about, ordering ahead, pick it up on your way to work, collecting points, that kind of thing. It has a very specific use case for the native app, which is going to be very different from the use case of Starbucks.com. So in that case, it would make sense for them to have very different experiences, and you'll make design decisions to cater to those experiences. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have clients like Patagonia, who, their site and their app converged so much, and their website started to become a better experience. They actually developed a progressive web app, which I think we'll come back to later on in the webinar series. But because of that, they were actually able to encourage their users to uninstall their native apps. So they sunsetted that entirely. And that's an example of where those experiences really converged. So again, it really depends. But thinking through, what is the goal? What are you trying to get the users to do? And are you really making that as easy as possible is what I would keep in mind.
Awesome. Thank you for that quick plug for our final webinar, which will be about progressive web apps on June 11th. So if you're interested in learning more about that, which is a really interesting topic when we're talking about mobile website and apps and the combination of the two, make sure to join us on June 11th for that. All right, next question. You've mentioned good UX as a key indicator in driving revenue. Can you go into some detail of the most effective UX strategies for various industries? For example, content writing, illustration, video, information architecture.
Yeah, so certainly I can grab this one. So really it depends on what your action is for your users. So a lot of them we talk about mobile revenue, and that's from a retail perspective. And so really trying to drive users to take action, to add to cart, and complete purchase. For different industries like lead gen, the goal there being sign up. And so really when you're making UX decisions, it's all about keeping in mind how easy the user can get through not only your sign up process, but also get information they're looking for. So if you're EDU or an education client and you're trying to get students to sign up for classes or just to sign up and get more information about your school, it's all about trying to answer questions they might have before asking them to submit their contact information. And so really it's going to vary a little bit by industry, but it's all about thinking about your value propositions and highlighting your calls to action so that users can find information on each page and then take that action. And again, images and that are things that we also recommend having above the fold, as we highlighted in some of the earlier trainings.
All right. So, next question back to accessibility. Do you have any suggestions for how someone could get their team on board to prioritize accessibility? How can we make this a priority within organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that it can seem like a daunting thing to get started with, but it's definitely a team effort, right? It's not just one person who raises their hand to play point on this. It's really about changing the way your team thinks about the process from beginning to end, and everyone needs to feel a little bit accountable. There's actually a great video on this that Emily, maybe we can send out with the resources afterwards. But it's Rob Dodson's video on the how-to guide for accessibility for teams. And he really kind of breaks down his proposal of what the project manager should own versus the designers versus the developers when it comes to thinking about accessibility. That way, you're all sort of parallel pathing it and you can incorporate it all in your personal objectives on a quarterly basis. So that's one main resource I want to call out. Um, Earlier, I walked through the Lighthouse accessibility audit. One thing I love to do when talking to partners is take a snapshot of what their score is today and then talk through, what could our roadmap look like? What are some of the low-hanging fruit things we can address together quickly? Like maybe the color contrast would be an easy one to begin with. I feel like for that one, it's not like you need to do a complete overhaul of your site or your app. So you can start with low-hanging fruit wins, just so there's team morale and everyone feels good that you are making progress, and then you can tackle maybe some of the more bigger issues in coming quarters. And every quarter you can show your leadership team how you're progressing in your accessibility score, and as long as you kind of keep upping that score quarter by quarter, I'd say you're on the right track.
I'd also add that I bet having users with disabilities in the user testing groups could open eyes of others in the organization as to challenges that they might not even know exist. And maybe once they become aware of these challenges and see how users are coming up against them, they would feel motivated as well to help fix them. It could be just an awareness issue.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And also, one thing that I want to add here is leadership buy-in. I think is really critical because a lot of times at the end of the day, it's a resourcing and prioritization issue. So talk to your decision makers and make sure they're bought in, because if they're not, and you have other priorities, it's going to take a backseat, right? So making sure your team has the air cover to work on this is really key.
Great. All right, so this is a bit of a long question, so stick with me. How do you decide when to use infinite scroll or pagination? Why should infinite scroll be avoided? Can you explain more about this? Pagination can sometimes feel annoying since the user has to stop seeing products and tab and wait for more products to load. So it sounds like this is a more retail-focused question when you're looking at a lot of different products. But I think it's also relevant for forms too, since this comes up a lot for application forms I've seen. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I can jump in on this one. So I think in general, the rule of thumb with everything we've mentioned today is first and foremost, you want to A/B test everything, right? To make sure that users, what we think is a best practice and what we believe is, you want to make sure that you're testing it on your website so that you have validation before you go roll out some of these changes. Just to, again, make sure that you're putting your users first and for the experience. In general, we recommend doing the load more versus pagination when it comes to list. So the reason for that, there's a couple reasons for that, but one, load more is more touch friendly. So it allows you to just click it, and you don't need to remember which page you're on if you want to go back and forth between products. I know we've all been there before where we're trying to go back to, was that page 3? Was that page 2? Which one did I see that product on that I liked now that I'm 5 pages deep in the search? Load more also allows users to opt into continuing that browsing history. So infinite scroll a lot of times will just continuously add products and the user isn't opting into that action necessarily. So the user might just want to see those first couple and then take another action, but you are continuing to add additional products and push them further and further down from their search. So again, it's that self opt-in. And so again, we recommend the load more option versus pagination or infinite scroll. That's not to say that they don't work though. And so again, our recommendation is to A/B test it.
Great. All right, I think we have time for one last question. Quickly note, I do see a lot of questions coming in about A/B testing for larger periods given ITP 2.2, how to make a great experience on a hybrid app. And those are great questions. We are going to save those for the future webinars related to A/B testing and progressive web technology, since those are going to be covered in those sections. So I just wanted to acknowledge I do see those questions, and I will make sure that those get covered in those subsequent sessions. The last question that we see entered today related to accessibility and UX best practices is a great one. So should mobile UX take the lead on how we think about UX design? And I'm assuming that means relative to desktop, perhaps. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I'll take it,
okay.
sure. And folks in the audience, feel free to chime in with your ideas as well. So for this, I think what we encourage teams to do is to take a step back and really understand the role that mobile plays in the student journey. So I'll give you an example. I work with a lot of education partners, and we study the education user journey a lot, really trying to understand what are all of the touch points that schools have with prospective students during their decision-making process, from the first day they think about maybe going back to school to the day their butt's in that seat taking that class. And what we found is that in education specifically, mobile is a tool that's very popular for research. So when people are in the top of the funnel, and by the way, this applies to many verticals as well, mobile is a really good tool for research, and a lot of times we end up converting. The actual conversion event happens on desktop, but because research happens on mobile, we have such a small screen on mobile devices. The challenge there with my education partners is to figure out how to really win prospective students over right away using that above the fold space. So there we're really focused on, content strategy and a lot of the things Patrick and I were talking about earlier, like value proposition and call to actions, and maybe even urgency regarding, applications are due in 30 days, something like this. So in that sense, we would really want you to think about what is the specific role that mobile plays in the journey. And again, thinking about what actions you want users to take and what does good UX mean in that context. One other thing it's a whole nother topic, but the topic of speed and page load, we didn't really get into that too much today. But with the advent of mobile devices, one kind of new element we're forced to think about when it comes to UX is really the topic of speed. And most sites rely too much on heavy JavaScript to make the site function, whether it's forms, filtering, that kind of thing. So really kind of pushing your developers to make sure that they're doing whatever they can to minimize that the weight of the page so that users are having a good experience on mobile will be key.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for submitting those excellent questions. Thank you, Ayemi and Patrick, for your answers. And we are at time, so quick plug to join us next week. We're going to be talking about zero maturity research design sprints, also user testing, which we started talking about today. We'll go into some more detail. And we're going to talk about product excellence, organizational excellence. There's a lot that we are going to cover next week. So please join us next Tuesday, May 21st, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to watch the videos in advance on the Mobile Marathon websites and submit your questions. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you to our wonderful speakers, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.